what is a spot actually? A spot is basically just the place where we are standing right now and catching fish. But what is a spot in the game? So what can we as players influence at these places where we are fishing right now? And how does what we do here actually affect things? Before we continue with the different tutorials, let's first clarify this properly. What is a spot? And what do we actually know about spots in the game? This is now one of the most important videos in the entire tutorial series, because here we clarify what a spot actually is in the first place. That is why this video also appears in all playlists, so in all areas of the tutorial. In this video, it is therefore about what we know about spots. So, what information do we have about spots? And above all, how do we use this information that we have about spots? When we are at a body of water and look around a bit, there are spots everywhere. So across the entire water surface, there are spots. The entire water, so to speak, contains spots. That is the amount of information we have. But then why do we not catch fish everywhere? Different spots also host different populations of fish. That means that, for example, closer to the shore, you might find an crucian carp more often. Further back, you might then find more common carp or koi carp. And maybe a little further to the left next to that, there is a spot where F1 carp or also tench tend to stay. And of course, this does not only apply to bottom fishing here. The same naturally also applies to float fishing and also to spinning. So even in flowing waters, we naturally have different spots. And additionally, very important for float anglers, we do not only have spots on the water surface, so to speak, but also at different depths. That in turn means that we also have to look for different fish species at different depths. And this also affects spinning anglers, because depending on how fast you reel your spinner through the water, the spinner will also stay at different depths accordingly. To make the whole thing a bit more visual, I will draw this out for you once. So let's quickly go in here and zoom in a little bit more. We now have our angler standing here at the water, standing here at the spot. And we can already see here that basically the entire water surface contains spots. The big question, of course, is how are these spots divided up? Is it maybe in some kind of pattern, or is it perhaps much more detailed, much finer structured? These are, of course, things we do not know. These are internal game informations, and we do not even want to know them. Because if we completely demystify the entire game, then at some point it also becomes boring, and then we only fish by checklist. And that is something other games can do better. So it's not about completely demystifying the entire game here, but about using the information we do have in such a way that we can simply fish better. And also very important, what I'm drawing here now, or what I'm telling you now, these are all informations from the last years, from a wide variety of questions and answers with Russian Fishing 4, and of course also my personal experience from the last 16,000 hours in the game. So at a body of water, we choose a place that already visually looks like fish could stay there. Now the big question, of course, is, which fish are you looking for? Or do you maybe first want to see what kinds of fish are even present at such a spot or at the place where you are fishing right now? And that means you naturally first throw a wide variety of baits into the water to find out which fish are here and what do these fish like. A single spot contains different populations of fish. That means we have different quantities, so different numbers of fish that differ in quantity, so in sheer numbers at such a spot. We might have various roach here at the spot. Then there might also be gibel carp in there, or also crucian carp. Then we might additionally have a larger number of common carp at such a spot, or also F1 carp present at the spot. And then we add another very small population of koi carp here, and maybe also various other different fish. So things that for us, when we are bottom fishing, might not even be interesting at all. So something like, for example, pike. All of these fish now populate such a spot. And our task is, of course, to find out what these fish actually like at the spots. Yes, and as already mentioned just now, we of course first test this with a wide variety of flavors, or rather, as a lure angler, when you are spinning, you of course also test this with different colors, with different shapes of your artificial lures, and additionally you test at different depths. That means you naturally pull the lure a bit deeper through the water sometimes, or you cast further out and try to retrieve it a bit flatter. And especially when spin fishing, it is of course extremely crucial that you also remember where you cast and how fast you reel in, because that naturally determines which spots you retrieve through, and so that the next time you cast, you can again retrieve nicely through the exact same spots where you caught a fish. And when bottom fishing or float fishing, we can of course simply set a line clip, and then when float fishing, we naturally land exactly on the spot where we want to be. Or when bottom fishing, we can of course simply cast out like that, and then naturally maybe land right here in the next spot, and then test in this way which fish are present in this area. Carp anglers also have to adjust even more to different layers, because water temperatures fluctuate, so sometimes there is cold water, normal water, or warm water. The fish also stay in different zones accordingly. That is also why we know that we naturally do not only have spots that go down like columns from top to bottom, but there must be different spots on different layers. For carp fishing, especially with different water temperatures, the zig rig is of course extremely interesting, because through the longer leaders we have the possibility to cast to different spots at different depths. So now we have a place here where we are standing, and we naturally first test such a spot without any ground bait, and of course first test which fish are present. If we then find out that at a certain place, let's just say here at a distance of 10 meters, there is a spot where we find, for example, a lot of tench, then we naturally use, in order to catch even more tench, a ground bait that is perfectly composed for tench. That in turn means if we now throw our ground bait onto this spot, the ground bait influences the entire population. So all fish species at this spot, and piece by piece, through the addition of ground bait, the spot changes in such a way that the population of tench naturally increases and the population of other fish decreases. As a result, we naturally catch significantly more tench at such a spot, for as long as the spot is not simply fished empty, or for as long as we have not overfed the spot. That can of course also happen, that we throw far too much bait onto a spot and the spot then simply becomes overfed. So start feeding such a spot with maybe 100 grams of ground bait, and over the course of the first 30 minutes that you are fishing there, so 30 minutes of real life time, go up to maybe a maximum of 200 grams of bait. With that, you have a solid base of ground bait on the spot, and you will usually not overfeed such a spot. There will of course also be separate videos about the production of ground bait, how you mix it, and about the effect of ground bait. If you now have completely overfed your spot, which of course happens from time to time, for example when you forgot to remove the bait from the feeder basket, then the spot is overfed for 2 real-life hours and first needs time to reset. The same naturally applies when the spot is simply empty. That means you may have been standing there for maybe 1 or 2 hours at such a spot with always the same bait, and you continuously catch the same fish out of this spot. Then the spot is naturally, for one or another fish species, also eventually fished empty. In that case as well, such a spot needs 2 hours to slowly regenerate. That is why I also recommend to you, regularly in the videos about the different spots, for example at Amber Lake, to do a rotation between 3 different spots, so that you stand 1 hour at the first spot, 1 hour at the second spot, and the 3rd hour at the 3rd spot, and while you are standing at the 3rd spot, the first spot has already regenerated again. And in this way you can continuously move from one spot to the next and always find a fresh spot again. If such a spot is empty, or if you are currently not catching anything at a spot, then you cannot influence that by briefly logging out of the game and logging back in again. That has absolutely no influence on such a spot because the spot is, so to speak, server-side overloaded by you, either fished empty or simply overfed. And whether you, as a player, log in or log out, has no effect at all on the spot. So all these fantasies about that having any influence have already been disproven multiple times by Russian Fishing 4. It has absolutely no effect on a spot. Even the wildest theories that you keep relogging until you find the right IP address and only then start catching the really big trophies, those are simply fairy tales as well. The biggest influence on whether you catch something is, of course, first of all, the right bait, the appropriate setup, and then, naturally, also external influences, temperatures, the weather itself, and of course, very importantly, different times of day. So let's summarize once again. If we are standing at such a place here, and we maybe take another closer look at the map and then measure out exactly where we want to place our baits, because it already looks interesting on the map, then ideally we choose a target, maybe on the horizon, so that we can say, okay, if I now cast all 3 rods toward this tree, then all baits will always land in the same place. The bait always lands in the same place, and accordingly influences the spot that is located there. We do not see these spots, of course. We simply have to assume that such a spot is there. If we now cast the baits very far apart, so once to the left, once to the right, and once in the middle, it is entirely possible that we hit 2 or even 3 spots. So, if you want to fish as efficiently as possible with all 3 rods on one spot, you ideally try to place all 3 baits directly in the same place. Additionally, this also has a positive effect on the applied ground bait because ground bait has an effective radius of 2.5 meters. That means within 2.5 meters around the bait, the ground bait influences the existing spots, and ideally it then works out like this, and you catch sometimes more, sometimes less interesting fish. And for float anglers, it is of course also important that you do not only cast to the same place, but that you also set the same depth, or rather when testing whether spots work well somewhere, you naturally also test different heights to find out which bait works at which depth. What also helps you here is looking at how the mouth of each fish species is shaped. Here with the barbell, the mouth naturally points downwards. That means the fish tends to take the bait from the bottom. Then of course there are fish that take the bait from the midwater. And there are also fish that prefer to feed right at the surface. These are also confirmed indications that we can orient ourselves by. So depending on which target fish you have, pay attention to what the fish looks like and where it tends to stay. For example, the mirror carp or also the silver carp tend to stay more in the midwater. And when you have all this information and all this background knowledge, you naturally start catching better and better over time, and you can already imagine where the different fish might be located. Yes, so much for the information about spots and how spots are structured, or rather what we know about spots. Further details about the different fishing methods can of course now be found in the respective playlist for that fishing method. That means the entire tutorial series is structured in such a way that there is a separate playlist for each fishing method, so that you immediately have all information compactly for each specific fishing style. So for bottom fishing, for float fishing, for spin fishing, and of course also for sea fishing, you will find all playlists on this channel, and these will now be filled step by step with more and more tutorial videos. Feel free to share the videos with your fishing friends as well, and we will see each other in the next video. Until then, tight lines.